friends. I'm your host, Erin Port, and welcome to the Simple Purposeful Living podcast. Life can be overwhelming and busy, so once a week, I invite you to join me, and together we will make simple tweaks to uncomplicate the hard parts of our life so we can spend more time doing what we love. If you've ever felt like the clutter in your home is weighing you down, today's guest gets it. Julia Ubbenga, a minimalist living coach and the founder of Rich in What Matters, debuts a brand new book called Declutter Your Heart and Your Home. It goes beyond tidying tips. It's about finding peace by making space both inside your heart and inside your home. We're talking about what minimalism really looks like, why less can actually create more joy, and of course, a few tiny practical tweaks you can try today, because I love to leave you with something that you can do when you leave the podcast. Well, let's welcome Julia to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Erin. I'm excited to be here.
Well, for those of you that are new to meeting you today, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what inspired you to start Rich in What Matters?
Yeah, so my story starts in childhood. I have not always been a minimalist. I'm an unlikely minimalist, actually. I grew up close to my grandma, and my grandma loved to shop. She would shop whether she needed something or not, whether she had the money or not. She would just go buy things. It was her love language to give gifts, to give me stuff. So we'd spend time together and we'd go shopping, we'd stroll the malls. And I soon learned that shopping was fun. It was a way to feel good. It was a way to kind of cover up hard feelings, to not feel bad. And I carried this mindset with me into my 20s. I started making money, I started spending money, and pretty soon I had all this stuff and $40,000 worth of consumer debt. So when I thought about the debt, I felt bad. But when I felt bad, I'd go buy something new because that's what I thought would make me feel good and make me feel happy. And so this cycle really continued until the time our second daughter was born. And I was working outside the home as a speech language pathologist at the time, but I'd always wanted to stay home with our kids. That was my dream, to be a stay-at-home mom. And my husband got a promotion at the time. I could stay home. I was so excited. But I had this really idyllic vision of what stay-at-home mom life would be like. I thought my daughters and I would be snuggled on the couch, reading Little House on the Prairie, giggling over tea parties. So in my mind, it was just going to be great. Well, a couple weeks into the stay-at-home mom gig, I would not have even called myself a stay-at-home mom. I would have said a full-time stuff manager would have been a better title. Because Erin, that is what I did. I was constantly looking for things and picking things up and cleaning things and tripping over stuff I hadn't picked up yet. It was all consuming. I was exhausted. I was stressed. I was distracted. Like I was there, but I wasn't really there. And I was just overwhelmed. So, a couple of months into living this way, I was diagnosed with postpartum depression. And I have this memory of this moment where I was up in the recliner chair feeding our baby in the nursery. And I was talking with God. I was really pleading with God. And I was like, God, what is going on here? This isn't what I signed up for. Something needs to change. And I was reading the Bible, and a couple verses out of Luke chapter 12, they jumped off the page at me. And they said, your life does not consist of possessions. Be rich in what matters. And so I paused right there and I asked myself, was I rich in what mattered? Was I rich in relationships, time for a faith life, for a hobby that I loved? And no, the answer was absolutely not. So that planted the seed that something in my life around the area of possessions needed to change. But I didn't know what, I didn't know where to go from there. And that same week, I had a therapy appointment. And at the end of the session, just as I was leaving, the therapist said, Julia, have you ever heard of minimalism? I'm like, oh, you mean houses with white walls and next to nothing in them? And she's like, no, there's more to it than that. Look into it. I think you might be interested. So I was curious and I did a Google search there in the car right after the session and realized there's a lot of resources about minimalism. And I started reading books and blogs about it and listening to podcasts about it. And this idea that I didn't need all this stuff to be happy and I could be a whole lot happier with less of it because then I'd have more time and energy to focus on who and what mattered. It was a mindset shift that was life changing. And it finally gave me a vision of how to get out from under all this stress and anxiety that I was feeling at the time. So I went all in on minimalism. I started a blog at the time. I called it Rich in What Matters. And then I went ahead and we got rid of 75% of our stuff over the course of the first year. We downsized to an apartment home for a couple of years and we got rid of our consumer debt. We built our own intentionally smaller new home. So we've been living this way as a minimalist family for 6 years now, and we have 5 kids, ages 11, 7, 4, 3, and 4 months. And so, yeah, now I've written this book, Declutter Your Heart and Your Home, how a minimalist life feels maximum joy for anyone else who feels called to live a lighter life with less stuff.
Wow, so much to unpack there. So cool the way God spoke to you in that moment. I feel like there's times in our life where that happens, right? Where it's like so clear. And then I love that it was like, and then it was just like the next step. Like he's so gentle and caring for us. Like, okay, this is what I'm teaching you. And then like at therapy, then it was like, and this is like a step to get you into that direction. That's so cool. First of all, I'm a huge therapy advocate, so high five to you. Thanks for sharing that because I'm always like so happy when other people share that they go to therapy. But so cool. So, okay, so my I'm going off script a little bit because I just have to know myself. When you went from, okay, this is the vision, because I think you said something there that I think is so powerful. First, you had a mindset shift. Like there's this like shift in your how you're thinking about stuff, right? And then you're like, okay, but then there's this like practical, how do I get from point A to point B? And I love that you said you didn't do it overnight. It took you a year, right? There was a process. But do you remember where you started? And maybe you can share a little bit about that.
Yeah. So where I started decluttering initially was what I had read in the books. I had read to start in a small, contained, non-sentimental area because that would be easy and then that would give me lots of motivation to keep on going through my home. So I tried that. And I tried my kitchen drawer to begin with, and I had this nice organized kitchen drawer. I had the feel goods from finishing a decluttering project, but then I turned around and my home was still overrun with kid stuff. And I was stressed immediately again. So that wasn't creating any functional change in my home to start with the kitchen drawer. So what I realized I needed to do was to declutter in the order of categories that were causing me the most stress. So I just wrote out all the areas of my home that I wanted to declutter, and then I rated them. 10
Mm,
was the most stressful, and then down to 1 was the least stressful. And that's the order I decluttered my home. So I started with kids' clothes. Those were the most stressful for me. It was a 10 for sure. And as soon as I decluttered kids' clothes from our home, I felt this lightening that I hadn't felt at all with that kitchen drawer. And our daughter, our oldest, who was 5 at the time, she started helping with laundry independently because the amount now matched her ability level. And I was like, wow, I am on to something. And so that really motivated me then to go to the next category, which was kids' toys. And so that's what I would recommend. And then I started small too. I didn't do it, I had a baby and I had a 5-year-old at the time. So I was just doing 15 minutes a day, maybe a little more on the weekends when my husband could watch the kids, but 15 minutes a day just consistently. And that adds up to 7.5 hours a month, which is 90 hours a year. And you can get a lot done with those small, consistent efforts.
okay. Again, I love the practicality of this. Okay, so I have decluttered my kids. I'm a former first grade teacher, and so some of that plays into just knowing kind of that less for kids is actually more because they get decision fatigue as well. But I know personally, I have struggled with this like mom guilt of taking things away from my kids, if you will. And I'm sure there's a mom listening who's like, "Oh, but there's stuff." Like so what would you say to that mom about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I had some of that in the beginning, for sure. I think that's normal to question what you're doing. What if my kids aren't going to have a good childhood because I'm taking away some of their stuff? Our culture tells us we can buy our kids a good childhood. We
Mm,
can't, but we still think sometimes that we can, and we start to second guess ourselves. So for me, what helped was reading the research. Once
mm,
I read the research, it was crystal clear to me that kids thrive in a simple environment. And, just some of the stats I saw was that we have 3% of the world's kids here in the United States and 40% of the world's toys. So
mm.
there's this huge discrepancy. We have so many toys in our culture. The average kid gets 70 toys a year. I mean, there's only 52 weeks in a year. That's a ton of toys, right? So we're just inundated with toys. And so what's happening, studies are showing, is that kids are actually getting overwhelmed. They're getting overstimulated, decision fatigue, like you mentioned. There's a study done in Germany that I really love where they took all the toys out of a kindergarten classroom and then they just observed how the kids played. And at first, the kids were a little confused. Like for one day, day one, they didn't really know what to do with all this new space and without all those toys. But by the second day, they were playing more deeply, more independently, more creatively, just with the tables and the chairs and whatever was there in the environment. And they concluded that kids thrive in a simpler environment. Their problem solving skills improve, their creativity improves. And so I read this, I'm like, that's not just in a classroom, that's in a home too. And I'm
Mm.
going to try it. And I did. And yes, our kids play so much more deeply and independently and better. I would not go back to having a home full of toys.
It's so interesting too. I'm sure you've felt this and experienced this with your kids. My kids are 16, 14, 8, and 6. They all just had birthdays, so I had to think about that for a minute. But what I have found, and this has motivated me then, is that when I do declutter or we do tidy a space and we put everything back, it's almost like taking a coloring sheet that's all colored and giving it to a kid and say, be creative and have fun with this used coloring sheet, right? Just stuff everywhere versus a blank piece of paper. I mean, my kid he just loves a blank piece of paper. I'm always losing reams of printer paper because he's taking them. But it's that same idea of like when we take stuff out of the space, like you said, it's creating these waves of creativity. And I find that my kids play so much better with less than more, as you said.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen that too. And I love that example of if you're giving them, something that's already filled, they're not going to have any space to create on it. And our kids are made to have, those slower childhoods with time to create. And that's just going to lead, to better life as an adult too. So we are doing our kids a favor when we simplify their environment.
And I think that simple mindset shift of saying, I'm not, it's not that I'm not loving my kid. I'm actually loving my kid. I'm helping them by doing this. And I think that mindset shift is so powerful. I love that. Okay, so to shift gears, because you wrote a book and it's been so impactful for so many women. What is your hope for readers, and what do you hope that they will take away from your new book, Declutter Your Home or Your Heart and Your Home?
Yeah, I think the first thing I want readers to realize is just to increase their awareness of what clutter does to us in our environment. Our clutter is creating a physiological response in us, and it's not a good one. And I
Mm,
think many of us think our clutter around us is neutral, and it's not.
mm,
Everything we see in our home, it speaks to us, clean me, pick me up, wash me. And then we've got our kids in our home too saying, pay attention to me, read to me. So we can just get overwhelmed so quickly. There's some studies that support this too. A study out of Yale showed a recent one, it was just done last year. It showed that our brains expend so much energy trying to ignore the visual stimuli in a cluttered environment. So even if we're not focusing on the clutter, like consciously thinking about it, our brains are still trying to ignore it. And that can leave us distracted. That can leave us tired. And then the study out of UCLA that I love showed that mom's stress levels in the home are often tied to the amount of possessions they and their family have accumulated. The study went and they looked at 32 homes in the Los Angeles area, and then they measured the cortisol of the moms in the home. And the moms who described their home as messy or chaotic had higher cortisol levels throughout the day than those moms who described their home as restorative or
mm.
peaceful. And so those higher cortisol levels, the stress hormone, led to more anxiety and poor sleep. And so our clutter isn't neutral. It's causing us stress. And then when we are stressed, we're in a state of fight or flight. Our nervous system isn't in that calmer rest and digest state. And this affects everyone around us. It affects how we respond to our kids, to our spouse, how we even relate to ourselves, like how we enjoy our life. And so I think the main thing I would like readers, moms to take away from this book is just to realize that our clutter isn't neutral. And then we have agency over the state of our home.
Mm, I love that. So good. Okay. Everybody's going to go out and buy it because and I assume I've read part of it that like then you go into the practicalities too, like you talked about before of like where to start and all of those sorts of things.
Absolutely. Yep. The book, yeah, it's just full of tools. Each chapter has a tool at the end of it. And yeah, I go into all the different areas of the home and then the inner home too, which we can talk more about.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was a great segue.
All
Let's talk
right.
about what do you mean by the inner home?
So the book is divided into three sections that parallel a journey in through an outer home and an inner home. So section one is laying the foundation and decluttering the soul. And then you journey on up into the home to section 2, which is decluttering the main floor and the heart. And so an example chapter here would be like decluttering your wardrobe and letting go of comparison. So
Mm.
there's this outer and this inner decluttering piece. And then as you go up to section 3, it's decluttering the upstairs and the mind. And here an example chapter would be decluttering sentimental items and letting go of fear. Because
Mm.
what I found as I was decluttering my unneeded physical items is I was actually curating two homes. So my outer home, which housed my stuff, but
Mm.
then the inner home, the home of my soul, which housed God. And I realized that both needed to be decluttered for me to find peace.
And probably in order for it to be lasting change, there needed to be work in the inner home, just like anytime we go to therapy, right? Like if we don't get to the root of the problem, if you don't pick that weed at the root, it's going to come right back.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Erin, because what I found is that I was dealing with comparison, for example. And in the book, I talk about different inner clutter like reactivity, comparison, hurry, restlessness, fear, distraction. But a big one for me was comparison. And I would declutter, and sometimes that would kind of give me a dopamine rush, just like buying something new would, honestly. Like I felt good. I was letting go of stuff. But then I would see what my neighbor had, or I would see something on social media, and I was like, oh, but I need that. And I would buy it right back. And I never really felt that freedom that decluttering can bring because I was caught in that declutter, buy it back cycle because of comparison. And what I found helped me out a ton was practicing gratitude. It's really simple, but it's super powerful. So if I was in my kitchen and I had maybe scrolled recently or was scrolling and had seen a different kitchen that I thought, oh, that was better than mine. I need that other kitchen. I would stop and I would catch that comparative thought. And I'd be like, no, I have food in my fridge. I'm thankful for that. I have a roof over my head. I'm thankful for that. I have a family in this home who love me, and I'm thankful for that. So that shifted me out of comparative thinking. So every time I would have a comparative thought, I would counter it with three thoughts of gratitude, three things I was thankful for.
I just recently read something I shared on the podcast a couple of weeks ago about how we have this negativity bias, right? So that like everything that's negative sticks like Velcro. It's from a neuroscientist, and everything that's good falls off like Teflon, right? And so the idea of like making the good stuff stick, I love this, very practical, and like catching our thoughts, taking every thought captive. I mean, that's very biblical too, but just a really practical application. That's so good. Okay. We've touched on this a little bit with some practical tweaks. You're so good at this. But for the woman listening who right now is just she's got her kids home, it's summer. She's like, we are bursting at the seams both physically with people, all the things we can all relate. What is that realistic first step that when she turns off the podcast, like she's like geared and ready to go because you're so motivating? What is that first step she can take today?
I would say if she wants a quick decluttering win, I would say go declutter the front of your fridge. And the
Mm.
reason I say this is because in that study done at UCLA, they also looked at the front of people's fridges, the fridge density, they called it, how much stuff was on the front of the fridge. And homes with higher fridge density also had more clutter in their home. So there's a direct correlation between the amount of stuff on your fridge. The average home had 52 items on the front of their fridge.
Like
They had
magneted to their fridge?
yeah, like
Okay.
magnets or, pictures, reminders, just covered their fridge. And so I like the idea of getting that quick win by decluttering the front of your fridge. Take it all off, maybe keep one thing on, but that then is something you see often. And it's a constant reminder when you see it of, okay, I'm going to create real change in my home. This is no longer going to be this is no longer going to be a cluttered space, and I am going to live clutter free.
I love that. And I think you would say the same thing too, as each time you make a win over the last 6 years, you're collecting evidence as to why you're doing this. So at first, you have to just start, right? I always tell people the hardest part is starting because you have no evidence to support why you're doing it, right? So there's a little bit of a faith, like, I think this is going to help. But I just was talking to a friend yesterday and she said, control the controllables. And what she was saying was what your daily input and then trust the outcome. And I love that. So, like for you, like your daily output today or your daily input is clearing the fridge. And then if you do that repeatedly, the outcome is going to be what you want. But again, that idea of you got to start somewhere and you got to have a little bit of faith when you start.
Yeah, you do. And then realize too that as you're investing that time into decluttering, you're going to be getting so much time back.
Mm,
And I think that really can motivate us too. There's a study that showed that decluttering your home reduces the amount of time spent on housework by 40% in the average home. So if you're spending 10 hours a week cleaning and maintaining your home, you can get 4 of those hours back simply by owning less stuff. So
mm.
what could you do with 4 more hours a week? You could rest, you could write a book, you could do anything that you would like. So just remember that as you're decluttering and you're spending more time up front, you're getting that time back.
I love that. And that reminder too that all of our possessions, everything is speaking to us. It's not neutral like you said.
Right. Hmm.
Okay. Now, we've talked a lot about the practicalities, but and we touched a little bit on how it can bring more joy, but you talk about minimalism as a path to more presence and joy. What does that look like in your everyday life and how has it affected your relationships?
Well, I found I was a lot less distracted as I reduced the amount of things in my home. My mind just felt clearer, calmer. And so, what did that look like in my everyday life? I found that I was able to listen to my husband a lot more. I would ask him how his day was after work, but a lot of times I didn't know what he said. I was too busy looking at the dishes I still needed to take care of or the piles I needed to put away. Like I was too distracted. But now I can ask him that question and he can answer me and I can listen. And I even started taking notes, like specific things. If he tells me about a certain client he's having a meeting with, I can take a note on my phone or write it down on a piece of paper. And then later in the day or the next day, I can ask him, hey, how'd that meeting go with so and so? And that means so much to him. You can tell. He's like, oh, she cares about what I'm doing. And I feel like I was able just to see the details in people's lives more, my kids, my husband, as I reduced the amount of stuff in our home.
And you could be rich in what matters.
Relationships.
I
Yep.
love that. That's so good. And I think another thing that many people feel, maybe you've seen this in your work, is that when our homes are cluttered, we are oftentimes there's some level of shame, right? And so we're less likely to bring people into our home, and that can isolate us as well. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, sure. I would not want anyone to come over. I mean, we wouldn't host people because our house was just crazy. Didn't feel good to be in. And now we can tidy our home in 10 minutes. We do that as a team. I feel like if you live in the home, you help take care of the home. And so our kids know that. That's just our family culture. And so, yeah, we do a team tidy if we need to, as we know someone's coming over. It can take 10 minutes. So it doesn't stress me out to have anybody come over or last minute. And it's just made it so that we can host more, which we love to do. And it's just great though that the kids too, they know like where everything goes, everything has a place, and you're like, okay, 10-minute tidy, and they can just choose what they want to do. And I've taught them to be noticers too. Like they can notice when things need done. So that way I don't have to be nagging them as much too, because they know where things go. And if I just say, okay, guys, let's look around and notice what needs put away, what's out of place, and they can do that.
Okay, so real quick for the mom who's like, how can I help my kids to be noticers? This is a perfect time of year. We're in the middle of summer. I always think of summer as kind of the opportunity to share some of these life skills with our kids because they always say we're not just raising kids, we're raising future adults. So, how does that look like when you started helping your kids be noticers?
Yeah, well, first of all, anytime you're teaching a kid something new or expecting a new behavior from them, you really want to go to the teaching level. Don't expect them right away to do what you want. There's going to be some resistance, but just be calm and consistent with it. And don't, I think it's all about expectations, honestly. Like really lower your expectations and just say, hey, this is something new we're trying. I love to look at things as experiments, even decluttering. I love to try anything in the beginning as an experiment, so my expectations aren't too high and I won't get frustrated. So yeah, just lower the expectations. This is an experiment, and just consistently and calmly remind them, probably every day as you're starting, because it's something new they're learning, and you can model it too. Like as you're doing it, hey, I'm going to put this back in its home. This is where it goes, or just oh, I noticed that the plates are still on the table. I'm going to bring these back over to the sink. Would you like to help me take one over too? So it's modeling, it's teaching, and it's just giving it time until it just becomes something they do. You
I
still
love
might, but at
I
least they
love
know.
that. It really is. It's that same idea of like coaching, modeling. But I was talking to somebody the other day and there was like, I was never taught how to clean. And
Yeah.
it's a skill that needs to be taught. And I think that that was an eye opener for me as I was talking to her. Like, yeah, we have to teach them. We can't just, like you said, expect them to know how because we were also taught. So that's so valuable.
Huh? Yeah.
And the same with decluttering, I think too. Again, as consumerism has increased, as we have more stuff in our home, for many of us, we weren't taught how to declutter. So this is a new life skill that we're learning as adults because our society has changed so much.
I love that point. Yeah, the average home now has over 300,000 items in it. We're not made to manage that much stuff. We don't know how to manage that much stuff, but we're trying and it's stressing us out. And so, yes, as we begin our decluttering journey and diving into this, we need to involve our kids and we need to show them that we don't hold on to everything. We don't keep it all. And I love just this idea of not being the decluttering dictator. That doesn't work. I've learned just go into your kid's room with a box and you can set it on their floor and you can say, hey, and in a week or two, I'm going to take some things to kids who don't have as much stuff as you. If you want to add something in, feel free. And then leave the room. So give them ownership in that way. And kids are naturally generous. And so what I've seen is when you're consistently giving them opportunities to be generous, they'll respond.
Yes, my daughter was done with her Barbies. She wanted to get rid of her whole collection. And so I said to her, I said, okay, let's get it all out. We took a picture. And this was not as generous, but I think this is a valuable lesson too. Like your possessions have value. So we put it on the swap page and she made a little money, but she was, I think more than the money, she was so excited because she got to see the little girl who got her stuff. And it was invaluable, that lesson, right? Like I'm parting with it. It's just collecting dust. I'm not using it. And this other person can enjoy it. And I think for her seeing that was just a bigger lesson than I could have even anticipated.
Oh, I love that because my kids have asked before, they're like, show me who the kid went to. Can you show me? Yeah, I'm like, oh, I'm not really sure, but I love that. I'm doing the swap page where they actually come and get it and you can see.
Like, okay, here. So, okay, last question before we have to go. I'm a big on tiny tweaks, and I love that you gave us so many nuggets because I think if we start small and give ourselves grace to be beginners, you've talked about experimentation. I think that that's so valuable because as adults, we think everything we do should be done with mastery and we should know how, and that's simply not true. But what's one tiny tweak? It doesn't even have to be decluttering related that you've made recently that has made your life feel 100 times lighter.
I've made some mindset tweaks lately with my first thought in the morning and my last thoughts before bed. And I got this idea from Dr. Amen, whose work I also talk about in my book. But he recommends your first thought in the morning, ask yourself or tell yourself, today is going to be a great day. Because then your brain throughout the day starts looking for ways to validate that, to make that feel true. And so that's made life feel lighter. And then at the end of the day, I was sometimes trying to, solve the world's problems at bedtime when I was tired and just needed sleep. And so instead now I ask myself, what went well today? And I think of three things. What three things went well today? And that totally shifts your thinking and it does make you feel lighter. So in the morning, first thing, ask yourself or tell yourself today's going to be a great day. And then at the end of the day, what went well today? And that's helped out a lot.
I love that. And what a great way to end. Okay, we are going to link your brand new book because everybody's going to want it. But tell my listeners where they can connect with you online.
Yeah, well, you can find the new book anywhere books are sold, your favorite place to buy books. And then online, I'm at my blog, richandwhatmatters.com, and also on Instagram at richandwhatmatters.
Awesome. And she shares so many great things, so many great insights, things that make you think. And she's just a pleasure. So thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom with us. Congratulations on launching this book. And I'm just so grateful you took the time to be with us today, especially as a busy mom of 5.
Thanks so much, Erin. It was a fun conversation.
If you liked this episode, it would mean so much if you'd share it with a friend or leave a quick rating and review so others can find our show. Until next time, you can find me at Simple Purposeful Living on Instagram and Facebook.